Children's Miracle Network Hospitals has great partners in radio and incredible hospitals. And we decided several years ago that we wanted to find out the impact that our Radiothon had on our station's brands. So we contacted radio's premier research company, Coleman Insights, and asked them to do some field testing for us to find out how Radiothon affected a radio station's brand. And the people at Coleman have taught us and their clients over the years that there are only 5 things that a radio station can do to build its brand. Building its brand makes it human and makes it real, and it makes listeners want to come back again because it's a living, breathing thing. At the baseline, every music station needs to have finite and unique music images. After that, you build the personality images of a radio station. Real personalities on a radio station lend the brand credibility for everything that it does. It's what puts value in the brand. After that, there's contesting and marketing, followed by services like news, sports, and traffic. And at the very top is community involvement, taking care of the community, having a focused community service image. And when Radiothon started years ago, the goal was to positively affect 2 of these 5 images, personalities and community involvement. Is there something the radio station could do that would elevate the personality and community involvement images to deepen the brand? The rules of radio state that if you win any 2 of the 5 images, you'll win your demo. But if you win more than 2, you'll become insulated from attack. And so the thesis is, does Radiothon build additional positive image for a radio station's brand? What we sought out to test was that if Station A plays your favorite music and Station B has your favorite music but also your favorite DJs, does it do better than Station A? And if Station C has significant images and music and personality but also is involved in the community, will Station C have a deeper brand image and have higher listenership? And the research proves that Station C in a market will consistently do better than Station A or B. So here are the findings on images that show this to us. The graphs represent the 5 critical images of a station's brand. The stations on the left are stations that don't do a CMN Radiothon. Those on the right are the stations that do. And you might expect to find the music images in the red graph to be at parity, and that's true. But you see higher images for stations that have personalities because Radiothon is built around bonding the talent to the community. It has higher images for DJs that are involved in the community, which means your local images are significantly higher, in fact, 51% higher. Images for having DJs who are involved in the community are 42% higher for CMN radio stations than those that aren't. And to have an image for raising money for a local charity, CMN radio stations have an image 111% higher than stations that don't do CMN radiothons. And what the Coleman people have indicated to us by this graph alone, that the brand image of a CMN radiothon station is significantly higher and better than radio stations that don't do this. This is the perceptual impact that CMN Radiothon has on a radio station. How does a radiothon that raises X number of dollars for children's hospitals impact your perception of the radio station? For 72% of our respondents, regardless of whether they gave money to the hospital or not, this is just them having a knowledge of and absorbing Radiothon. 72% of them say it makes them feel more positively about the radio station. And we know that with any age group, if they feel positive about a brand, if the brand gives back to the community, they are much more inclined to frequent and purchase the brand. We find that throughout the year, in the previous slides, that Radiothon helps the brand image and makes those listeners return because they have more reasons to come back. Coleman people tell us that CMN Radiothon is directly linked to a significantly stronger brand for radio stations doing the event. Valuable brand depth beyond music is attained by our stations because of the event. Listeners feel more positively about the stations because the community images and personality images are higher. Listeners say that they are inclined to listen more the rest of the year because the station does good in the community. As compared to stations that don't conduct Radiothon, CUME listeners to CMN radio stations are 51% more likely to name CMN stations as most involved in the community. 42% are more likely to name CMN stations as having personalities who are involved in the community. Thus, personality, community service, and local images are significantly heightened by the event and are 111% more likely to name CMN stations as being the ones that raise money for a local charity. Longtime CMN stations reap greater image rewards than those that more recently joined. So the longer you've been at this, the deeper your images. CMN stations that devote more time to the event get better images than those that devote less time. We recently did focus groups in Chicago and Raleigh. We chose those cities because they have very successful radio stations, very successful and loved morning shows, and they have long-term radiothons that raise lots and lots of money. And we want to show you some unaided comments of the affection these listeners have for the morning show because of the bond they feel from the event and at other times of the year.
It's a good mix.
Eric and Kathy are one of the funniest hosts on the radio.
I think it's just enough mix of talk and music that it keeps you entertained to where you're not going to change the channel.
I love their contests.
Well, tell me more about the radio station.
Plays really good music.
And they're not crude or rude.
They have a radiothon every year and they raise money for children's.
You like their contests?
Yeah.
They do a lot for the community, and then of course they run the telethon.
As long as I can remember.
Yeah, they're a staple of Chicago. Yes.
They have John Tesh at night. I like John Tesh.
Sometimes catch myself talking to them in my car while listening.
Appropriate for everybody, because when you have people in your car from work or whatever, it's just a kind of station that stays on because you know it's safe and kind of fun.
The first project we did with Coleman was to gauge, do we have a positive impact on the necessary images radio stations must have to grow their brand? We next sought out, how do we do this event to minimize tune-out, knowing that almost anything a radio station does is a potential tune-out to some listener. So what we wanted to understand and have listeners teach us in focus groups, how were we executing our brands and what could we take from that to minimize PPM tune-outs so the radio station has maximum imaging and minimal PPM loss. First, what we learned was storytelling is the primary driver of listenership to our event. Second, an overall positive, uplifting approach and frame for the event for every break is key to keeping listeners tuned in. This does not mean you cannot have moments of sadness and challenge inside radiothons. You can, you should, because that's life. But having an overall positive frame to our breaks and to our event is critical to keeping listeners tuned in. Third, listeners need to know that there is a happy ending at the beginning of every break to carry them through. If we telegraph that at the very beginning of every break, that we are about to tell you a story that has a happy ending, in whatever words you use, listeners are more inclined to stay for the length of that break, knowing it will not end in sadness. And finally, listeners like financial empathy and knowing how donations are used at the hospital. And this makes what we do tangible, whether they give or not. The talent communicating financial empathy further bonds the talent emotionally to the audience. So the audience walks away saying, they get my life. So we did some media EKG studies in Chicago and Raleigh. We decided to play actual breaks of the respective radiothon to listeners in these cities. And we asked them to evaluate these breaks as they were being played so we could understand what we were doing that they responded positively to and what they responded negatively to, so that we could come back to our partners, both the hospital and radio stations, and make specific recommendations on do more of this and less of that to minimize tune-out during the event. So this EKG scale is not a happiness scale. It is not a goodness scale. This is an I like what I'm hearing scale, and I don't like what I'm hearing scale, with 50 being neutral, 100 being I love this, and 0 being I wouldn't listen to this.
We're going to have the opportunity to meet somebody coming up who shared these words.
After thinking about my experiences at Children's, I realized I had a page full of heartfelt, fun-filled memories and only a quarter of a page filled with painful ones. The bad memories made me think of how I kicked Cancer's butt. Twice, Cancer and I have parted ways, and Children's is and will always be a lifesaver. I have been poked, examined, x-rayed, isolated, and woken up at all hours of the night at the hospital. But that never stopped me from being strong. I never gave up the fight, and neither did Children's. They are the reason for my extraordinary journey. Cancer does not define me. I am not cancer. I am strong. I am a fighter. I am not scared of cancer. It is smaller than me. It is not intimidating. I am a survivor.
The words of an 11-year-old, now 13. This is Jam's story on The Mix.
When I was about 5, I was having problems with walking, and I would fall asleep at random times, and my parents knew something was wrong.
It lasted for a period of time, and then we finally just took her to the emergency room, and our doctor, Dr. Morgan, told us that it looked like she was in the early stages of leukemia. And so once you relapse from this type of cancer, you go and you have a bone marrow transplant. So we started looking for donors. She had a match from an umbilical cord in New Jersey. And this wonderful mother saved her son's umbilical cord when he was born. It was a good match for my daughter. And so we used that umbilical cord and gave her a stem cell transplant on September 10th, 2008. And then she was followed up for 2 years. And so here we are now, and we are cancer-free for now, and, living every day and dealing with side effects from the chemo and radiation. There would be times where she would be laying there, couldn't speak. She'd have machines attached to her face, and she'd have lines going everywhere, and I would be crying, and I didn't know that she would notice. And she would reach up and she would pat my back. She made it a lot easier for us. Children's was our home, and we just fell in love with the staff. And now, we hold a blood drive at our house every year to try to give back and try to, donate as much blood as we can. And there's a huge Lurie staff that comes. Ann Lurie comes to our blood drive, and it's fabulous. These are people that come because they love us, and we love them, and it's now a support and a family. They are not our nurses. They're not our doctors. They are really our family.
Jam kicked cancer's butt.
Yes, she did.
How about it, Aiden? How do you feel?
I feel great after what I went through, so I'm better, yeah.
And it's just like regular kid stuff now for you, huh?
Yeah, 5th grade. The teacher's awesome, Miss Lafferty.
All right. Yeah, woohoo.
Nice.
Yeah. Woohoo. Do you ever look back or think back to all you went through, or is that just history? That's in the past. You don't worry about it anymore.
I try to get that out of my head, but sometimes it just comes back, and sometimes nightmares happen, but
the day is coming. The day is coming.
The day is almost past.
There you go.
And Aiden, do you realize that through your survival and your smiles and everything that you went through, do you know how many kids and even adults you've had an impact on, and how many kids and families that you've given hope? Do you know that you've done that?
I do now. Okay,
And that's a very, very important and powerful thing. It's got to make you feel great.
It does. Kind of giving hope and inspiration to other families kind of makes me feel good.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
And Randy, for you, as his dad, during those darkest days like we were saying before, did you see this day coming? Did you say, I'm going to get to that day?
He wouldn't let us forget. He honestly had that fire and that lust for life the entire time we were here. And I was seeing some kids walking around with their IV poles, just now, and I remember like it was yesterday, being in Children's Hospital, hearing those phones ringing and hearing you guys fighting and trying to get more people to call in and doing this amazing event, and just sitting back and feeling for one of the first times during that process that we really weren't alone, that these people were fighting, other people were fighting this for us, and it really gave us a ton of hope.
So for those families that are in this hospital now that are looking for that hope you just said, that unending hope, to be sitting where your family is sitting now, you're a living testament, Aiden's a living testament that miracles can happen?
Absolutely, and as amazing as this hospital is, the beauty came over with the people that were there. The doctors, the nurses, the support staff, you guys. I can't say how amazing this hospital is, enough about this hospital, but truly it's all about the people that came over.
Aiden, I'm not going to lie to you. It's awesome having you here.
Yeah, we love it.
That's great.
(684-1015), 866-684-1015, and online, WRALFM.com. With those numbers in mind and the website in mind, listen to this just little clip. It's just like a minute long, but just a little taste of Camp Kaleidoscope. I'm here at Camp Kaleidoscope. What are some of the things you do? What's your fun things to do here at camp?
I like to play board games in the unit house.
You always win?
Of course not.
Have you been doing any pranks on any of the counselors? Practical jokes going on?
At lunch, I put an ice in somebody's back, and then they told me, wait till tonight, I'm going to get you. And then I said, I just have to see about that.
You look like you're having a blast here at camp.
Yeah, I sure am.
Are you Miss Popularity?
Sure.
You got a big smile going on. You're having a good time. What do you have fun doing?
I have fun swinging from the rafters in the cabin.
Swinging from the rafters in the cabin. You know, when they list the official activities here at Camp Kaleidoscope, swinging from the rafters in the cabin is not on the list.
Please call now and help send a kid to Camp Kaleidoscope.
Kids having fun at camp. There you go. A taste of Camp Kaleidoscope. And what, $300, if you can come up with $300 and want to make that donation for the kids at Duke Children's Hospital. We like to fill up that camp every summer. And it's, by age brackets and stuff like that. But again, it's just a great time for kids to be kids. It's up at Camp Canada, I believe. Told the story yesterday, Mike, when Jonathan was here in the hospital. He was in his room, corner room on the 5th floor.
Always positive.
That's right, always positive. All about Eagles. I don't know how many Eagles
yeah.
in his room.
Yeah.
Of course, he's a big Duke fan. He left his room after 18 months in that room to come down here and make the first shot, basketball shot, on this playground just outside of where we are that was paid for by money from the Radiothon.
Right.
He came out, made the shot, and went back to the room. Always positive.
I know. I was there. We had a choice as a coach who could hit the shot, and they gave me Jonathan and you. I said, Jonathan, you haven't been out of your room for a year and a half. This guy cannot hit a shot. You got to come down, man.
You make it sound like you had a choice. You had no choice.
Well, there wasn't a choice.
There was no choice.
There was no choice. It was a special day.
Absolutely a special
It was a special day. And when he knocked it down, I mean, he felt,
yep,
and we did too, like you just won a national championship. I mean, it's that's what the people here see every day when it works. It doesn't always work with a victory at the end. But the thing that we're doing is not just providing care, we're providing hope.
That's a biggie.
And care and hope together will produce more victories. And that's really what the Radiothon is about. The care, the money, and all that. But all the feelings that are conjured up during these 2 days, there's hope. Oh, you mean someone else is going to, that could happen to me. if it did happen to me, how would I handle it? Well, we can handle it. We can help. We can give you hope.
That's what Duke provides. We are so fortunate. We take for granted what a world-class facility that we have here. And we think it's just a short distance away. It's easy for us, and we do take it for granted. But people travel worldwide to come here for hope.
Now let's look at the impact. How does the average listener, unaided, talk about Radiothon at the respective radio station in regards to the development of the brand of both radio stations?
Why do you think Mix does this? What's their motivation?
Help families and the children, sick children. Yeah.
Well, they always said it's because it's here. We are so close to the hospital.
Good to hear. Good story.
I remember that one.
That one, I felt like as soon as you heard the child's voice, you knew it was going to turn out good. Like, it was like, okay, she's here, she's talking. I turned it down a little bit when the mom said, like, with the tubes coming out of her, I was like, okay, like, you know, I don't know that needed to be added in there because it was kind of one of those positive ones. And even the music was, like, uplifting, and it was, like, more like a triumph.
I kind of almost felt I didn't need to listen to it, though, since Kathy read that.
She kind of told the story
Right,
ahead of time.
right, or maybe kind of stole the child's thunder, if you will.
Kid out there, the kid could have read it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That one I could stay for, though.
I liked hearing that there was a positive outcome. Yeah, it was nice to hear us playing soccer.
Yeah.
That was nice.
I cry at music anyway. So to attach a story that says I'm in better hands now to a story where a child's in hospice, I would rather hear the story and not think I'm crying because of the song.
I mean, it's a local charity that everybody can kind of, and not necessarily relate to, but it's not like you're giving to a charity out somewhere that you have no idea where you're giving. I mean,
I love hearing the stories about what a difference it's made in somebody's life or in the community, how much money they've raised, all that. I'm all for it.
We learned from our perceptual study the positive impact CMN Radiothon has in building personality, local, and community involvement images. And our media EKG focus groups show us how to do the event to minimize tune-out. And we have some recommendations. First, storytelling will keep listeners tuned in. The primary driver of every event is the telling of stories every single break. So ensure a storytelling element is at every quarter hour, regardless of its length. Second, a short story is better than no story. Listeners respond, as you saw in one of the actual breaks in Chicago, Kathy reading a letter. It couldn't have been any longer than 30 seconds, and the audience responded positively to it. Third, avoid long stretches of chit-chat and asking for donations without a storytelling element. If we're going to have a call to action, which every Radiothon must have, it must be attached to a story when they are most receptive to it and want to step up and help. Finally, all interviews, regardless of where they originate, family, staff, sponsors, need to incorporate a story, especially sponsors. A sponsor's donation will be more positively evaluated if it's accompanied by a story of that sponsor's kid or a kid that they met. Emphasize a positive and uplifting story over a sad and dispiriting one. We learned this in the media EKG study, that stories that are sad, they start sad, they remain sad, and they end sad, are not positively evaluated. This is probably the biggest takeaway from the focus groups. So we are recommending that every story is introduced with a telegraphed message of a happy ending. So what we're saying to our hospitals and to our stations is, as you prep for this, load up your Radiothon with stories that have happy endings. This doesn't mean they can't have sadness in the middle of them, but if we telegraph there's a happy ending at the end of this, the audience will stick with the story. Do more stories with happy endings. Put these stories in a power category so that they air more than once. In fact, we'll share with you that if you have unhappy stories, put positive stories in a power category and feel free to rotate them every few hours. As we learned in PPM, the audience turns over so rapidly that there's no reason you can't take a positive story and re-air it in a few hours. Third, frame the beginning of all positive stories early on in the break, telling listeners that it ends well. And if you do that, even though the journey might have been tough, they will take that trip with you. Finally, don't eliminate sad stories or memorials. Just limit their use and place them strategically in a rotation toward the ends of goals. Another major takeaway from our focus groups, we believe, and the Coleman people have emphasized to us very strongly, that having a positive frame for our event will allow listeners to hear everything through that frame. If we promote Radiothon ahead of time and focus on a message of being positive and being uplifting, hope, determination, every piece that they hear during the event will be seen through that prism and defined in that way. We happen to like the use of the word miracle because it's in our name, Children's Miracle Network. But whatever frame you land on, if you over-communicate, everything will be seen through that prism. In post-event promos, after highlighting everything you did with the total throughout the prism, we suggest using words like positive, miracles, and so on. A few other nuts and bolts that we learned in the focus groups as listeners were making comments. They prefer familiar songs to unfamiliar songs, telling listeners how their donations are being used. This is why shopping works, and when we get specific enough, it becomes tangible. We are raising money this hour to buy this machine. All donations this hour are being used to buy video games for the hospital. We want to buy a lot of SpongeBob SquarePants bandages for the kids. When we use words like that, then it becomes tangible and people get it even more. Be careful not to guilt listeners into giving. Listeners like hearing financial empathy, but it's another connection point and bonds the personalities to the event, and that's critical. And let's remember, you only have to do this a few days a year to earn those positive images. So lastly, the summary. Let's take a look. Children's Miracle Network Hospital's Radiothon is directly linked to a significantly stronger brand for radio stations. CMN Radiothon positively affects your personality and community service images by positioning you as being local. Positive and uplifting stories are what listeners gravitate toward, retain, and want. Telegraphing each story's happy ending and having an overall positive marketing frame for the event is key to minimizing tune-out with maximum image gain in PPM. And remember, you only have to do this a few days a year to earn those images. And positive, uplifting stories minimize PPM tune-out.